What is up, sisters and misters? It is me, Mr. Junior, and today we are going to be building my monster of a gaming computer. So, just to let you know right off the bat, you're going to see that these parts are already opened. There's going to be thermal paste on the CPU and things like that. And the reason for that is because I've already built this computer once. I recorded it, I edited it, and then I tried to post it, and somehow the file got corrupted. And I wanted you guys to experience this with me, so I tore it all apart and I built it again so that you guys could experience it with me and see this crazy PC. So if we go ahead and get started, the first thing that we're going to notice here in my parts, so I have the Corsair iQ7000X RGB. This is a full-size tower. And then next we have the MSI MPG Z790 Edge TI Max Wi-Fi gaming motherboard. So this is a Gen 5 motherboard, so it has DDR5 RAM as well as Gen 5 Lightning NVMe for the M.2s. So with that, we have a Crucial T700 4TB NVMe. This is like the fastest NVMe out right now. So with that, we also have the Corsair HX 1500i. This is a Platinum Plus power supply. Then we also have the Elgato 4K Pro. So with that, we have it paired with an Intel i9 14900K. And then with that, we have our RAM. So this is going to be 48 gigabytes of DDR5 7200 megahertz. Then with that, we have our AIO. So our AIO, this is a Corsair iQ H150i Elite LCD AIO. This is going to be to cool everything down. And then we also have a little Logitech webcam here that I can use to record for streaming, gameplay, whatever. And finally, the piece de resistance. This is the MSI Supreme X 4090. And this is going to be one hell of a PC. So right off the bat, we're going to go ahead. We have our motherboard here. We have our CPU. We have our RAM, as well as the NVMe that we're going to install. So all of these are going to go on the motherboard before we put it in the case. So I'm going to grab this motherboard out. I'm going to lay the motherboard on top of the sleeve here because it's anti-static. But real quick, if you want to take a look in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see a little arrow there. So you're going to line that arrow up with an arrow that you should see on your CPU so that you know that you're lining it up correctly so that you don't break anything. So I'm showing you the CPU real quick. As you can see, there's some thermal paste on it and the arrow in the bottom left. So we're going to match that up. I'm going to go ahead, undo this tension arm, lift up the CPU housing, set that CPU in there, and then I'm going to drop this tension arm back down, and boom, CPU installed. Next thing, we got our RAM. So I'm going to show you again real quick. So on the board here, you'll see it'll show you which RAM slots to put that in. So it says DIMM 2 and DIMM 4. So I'm going to open up RAM slots 2 and 4, and we're going to go ahead and install this RAM. So you're going to go ahead and slot it in here. Then once you have it slotted in, you're going to push it down until you hear it click. So I put some pressure on it. I heard it click. So now I'm going to go ahead and grab my second stick. I'm going to put that in here. We're going to push it down until we hear it click. All right, it all snapped into place. So next, we're going to grab our NVMe. So I'm going to open up this little slot here, which is where the NVMe gets installed. And there's some residue there from where I had it previously. I took off the heatsink and tried it with just the motherboard cover, and it doesn't do as well as with the heatsink that's installed. So you're going to want to put it in at an angle, and then I'm going to flip over this little quick connect, and it's now all secured and in place. So the next thing I'm going to do, I have this little bracket that's for the AIO to mount the AIO in. So I'm going to flip the motherboard, put this little AIO bracket in there just so I don't have to mess with this motherboard later. Now that I have that in the back, I'm going to get these little screws, put these screws in here. This is what the front of the AIO will mount to. So I'm going to put these in here, screw all 4 of these in. All right, after getting all 4 of those in, now we have our CPU installed, our RAM, and our NVMe, so we're ready to move on. Next thing we have is we have our motherboard here. So as you can see, I have some wires laid out because, again, I've already built this once. So I'm going to go ahead and fit this motherboard in here, slide it in. After a little finagling, I get it all situated. And now I'm going to bring in the screws to start screwing in the motherboard. Now, obviously, I'm going to start up here in this top right corner. It's going to be one of the easiest spots to access. I want to make sure that I get secured in before it falls or anything. And there is a little peg in like the center of the motherboard that's holding it in, so it shouldn't fall, but hey, better safe than sorry, especially with, you know, parts that cost this much. So getting all these screws in here in this motherboard, getting it all situated. And then the next thing that we're going to do after getting this motherboard installed is get this AIO prepped. So got the AIO here. I'm going to pull out the AIO and I'm going to look at how it's going to be orientated so that I know which way I want it to go about. And something that makes it really easy is I have the top mounting bracket for my PC, so I can pop that off and I can just go ahead and put it right back on so that I don't have to finagle with it through the case. So I'm going to go ahead and I got to grab the screws. I'm going to figure out the way I'm going to mount it. So the back here on the left side for you guys that you'll see, but the right side for me is the front of my case. So I'm going to go ahead and start screwing in all these screws. And it'll take a minute, and after I get all these screwed in, I can move on to the next portion. Alright, so I'm getting this last screw situated in here, and then once I finally get this last screw situated, I'm going to go through, make sure they're all tightened down before moving on. So after getting them all tightened up, the next thing that we're going to be looking at is our fans. So you got to make sure that the fans are in the right positioning for like cable management as well as airflow. So if you were to take a look at these newer fans that Corsair and all these other companies make, normally they have arrows on them that tell you which way the airflow is going to be going when the fan's on. So getting them situated the way I want and making sure that it's all organized so that whenever I actually drop this in the case, I can pull the wires where I need to for my cable management as well as them pulling air the direction in which I want. So I have these orientated in a pulling air in through the radiator, and some people will say it's not the best, that I should have it as an exhaust, but I have a fan in the back for exhaust, and at the most it'll only make a few degree difference, so it is what it is. Later on I'll be trying to do more for airflow, but I'm going to go ahead and drop this in at the top. And I got my wire stuck here, so I'm going to pull that wire back out, drop it in. Now that's all set in there. I got these two thumb screws that hold it in the top. I'm going to screw in each of these thumb screws, and then I'm going to fasten it down with a screwdriver real quick. Got it all fastened in. The next thing I'm going to do is I have my AIO here, and we're going to pop this plastic off, and this is going to go right onto the CPU. Once I have it onto the CPU, there's going to be a couple thumb screws. So got to get this all situated, get these little thumb screws on here, trying to make sure that I'm not smeared around too much to make sure that my thermal paste isn't getting wasted or anything, since I already had to peel it off once. Now that I got all these thumb screws situated, making sure it's lined up so it's a nice look, and then boom, all situated. Time to move on. Next thing is some cable management. So I'm going to pull these wires through where I need them to go, where I want them to go, so that I can get a nice look for this PC. So I'm going to throw my fan wires in the back as well as the AIO wires for, you know, fans and all that kind of stuff. Fan wires are giving me a little bit of a hassle, and getting them pulled through, trying to make sure that they're all in the best possible position for cable management. So got them pulled through. I'm going to plug in the motherboard 24 pin here in a second, and also have our audio for the PC case, as well as like our LED power and reset switch for the case. So I'm going to go ahead and get this all plugged in as well. And then once I get that plugged in, we can move on to the next portion, which is some cable management. So I'm going to go ahead and pull in these power connectors in the top for my CPU. So since this is a big CPU, it requires two different power connectors. So I'm going to drop those in here, and I'm going to try to get it all situated so that I have my cables set up in positions before having to put in my power supply. So I skip out a bunch of the cable management because that stuff can take forever and it's not too fun to watch. So it's a little bit of a mess at the moment still, but it's well enough to where I can actually get this PC like established. So got all my wires set up. I'm going to hook this 24 pin up as well as the cables for my CPU. So the PCIEs for the CPU are hooked up. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to hook up the wires for the case as well as the power wires for my graphics card, because this thing requires 4 PCIe cables, so this thing's going to be nuts. I'm going to go ahead and plug these bad boys in. Once I have all these plugged in, I'm going to feed them through the areas that I need it to, And then I'm going to skip the cable management for this last bit again because it's no fun and there's a lot of it. Got the power supply in, so I just need to get my 4 screws that is required for the power supply. Gonna pull it up here. Then I'm gonna go ahead. Now I got my couple screws. We're gonna go ahead, throw these screws in here. The back of my head looks real nice, doesn't it? But get these screws installed, and after these screws are installed, I'm ready to move on from there. So after all the cable management, next thing that we're going to do is we're going to throw this 4K Elgato Pro in here. And it's going to be pretty simple. I already have the little spot for the GPU slot out. So I took that little rail out with a thumb screw. So I'm going to go ahead, slot it in here. It's just going to take up a GPU slot. So I'm going to mount it here in this lower slot. And now that I got that in there, I'm just going to take the thumb screw. And all I got to do is screw in this thumb screw, and this Elgato is installed. After getting that Elgato installed, the next thing I'm going to be looking into here is actually grabbing out the beast that is the 4090, the emperor of graphics cards, and we're going to be installing it into this computer so that we can get it running and run these games that I'm going to be playing at some ridiculously high frame rates and resolutions. So plugging all 4 of these PCIEs into this 4-to-1 adapter for the 4090, and then I'm going to make sure that I'm got it all secure, because having these not plugged in all the way has resulted in a lot of like 4090s getting caught on fire and like melted and stuff like that. So this 4090 will take up 3 of these GPU slots, so I got to pull out these thumb screws, and once I get these thumb screws out, I can slot this GPU in, and we'll nearly be finished, because this is the last part before I can turn it on. So I got it slotted in there, and I'm going to use this GPU mount to hold it up because I don't want it to sag, because this is one heavy card. So go ahead and get that set up. I'm going to plug in the power wire, get these thumb screws installed so this thing is secured, and we'll be nearly done. So I'm liking how it's looking so far, and this mount isn't holding it up as much as I'd like to, so I adjust that real quick and then fix these wires so they look a little bit nicer. And let's go ahead and power this thing on for the first time. Man, look at all these RGB lights. That makes me a real gamer. Those RGB means performance. But as you can see, these top fans, they're not turning on yet, so they lag behind a little bit because they're connected to an extender, because there's not enough slots for me to plug in all the motherboard USB headers. So now that we got this thing powered on, I can turn it back off, start building the case back together so that we actually have our completed build. So getting this front panel on, side panel. So there's a little scratch on that side panel whenever it was shipped, which kind of stinks, but is what it is. But I go ahead and get my glass here installed, and we're nearly finished. So a final look at this thing. Let's take a look and tell me what you think. Finally got this thing built, and we're taking a look at this beautiful machine. I got some dinner off here to the side, so after I get done eating, I'm going to go ahead and plug this PC in and start playing some games. So thank you guys so much for watching. Take it easy, and peace.